Hey everyone, this is Dr. Casey Johnson. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I know you're going to love today's episode with Dan and Sheanne Moskaluk. Dan and Sheanne are doing some amazing work and have an incredible story, so I'm excited to have them both on to share their stories with you guys. If you've been loving the Unlock Wellness podcast, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Also, be sure to follow me on social media to keep up with the latest podcast episodes. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. My username across the board is at Dr. Casey Johnson. That's DrKaseyJohnsson. You can also check out my website at drcaseyjohnson.com. It has all of the past podcast episodes and more information about each guest under the Listen tab. While you're on my site, be sure to check out the Shop tab where you can check out my first book of my Healthy Children's Book series. Thank you again for listening. I hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to start making positive changes to your health. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Dan and Sheanne Moskaluk. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Dan and Sheanne Moskaluk, aka Indian Raw Vegans. Dan and Sheanne have completely transformed their health and life with a plant-based diet, so much so that they were featured in the amazing documentary Eating You Alive. So I am excited to have them both on to share their incredible stories. So Dan and Sheanne, thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm excited to have you.
Well, thanks so much for having us, Dr. Casey.
Yes, it's so great to be with you and with your listeners alike and just talk about the subject.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys have done so much, but before we dive into all of it, why don't you start with your backstories? First off, where you guys are both from, and what did both of your health and wellnesses look like before you really embarked on your own wellness journey?
Well, I guess I'll start because I'll tell you the whole story. Our son came home in grade 10. And well, first off, we're both from Ottawa, Ontario. We grew up in Ottawa, Ontario. And my husband, Dan, is, just recently retired from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So his first posting out of training was here in British Columbia. So that started us right to BC, away from our families. And we lived a really traditional family life.
French Canadian for me.
Yeah. And so I was a stay-at-home mom, and I just thought I needed to cook delicious food for my family. And I really never thought about what was good or healthy, just that it tasted good and that everyone liked it, particularly Dan initially. It was just the two of us. And then as the kids came along, you wanted to have vegetables and things like that, but lots of hot dogs, lots of sandwiches, lots of just, I cringe when I think about it.
The chicken nuggets, the burgers.
Oh yeah. So in grade 10, our son came home and he had joined a gym, and he was told that if he was going to put muscle on, he would need to have protein powder. So being the good mom, off I went to the health food store, and I was looking at those giant jugs of whey powder with the 8 million ingredients on the side. And by a fluke of luck and a moment of just pure, it changed our lives. The sales clerk came over and she said, "Oh, well, who are you buying that for?" And I said, "My son." How old? 16. She says to me, "You might want to go home and do some research before you give that to your kids." And I thought, well, that's strange. How often do you have a sales clerk say that? So I put it back, I went home, and I Googled whey protein. And by another fluke of luck, I came upon a YouTube video by Dr. John McDougall called The Perils of Dairy. And I watched it, and it was like, who is this crazy quack? This is completely opposite of everything I've ever known or heard about dairy. But for some reason, it just fascinated me. And I watched it 3 more times. And then he mentioned, T. Colin Campbell from the China Study and Caldwell Esselstyn within this video. So I thought, well, have a look at them. And that just led me down a rabbit hole of information. And so at this time, I have to say that I was 300 pounds.
How old were you?
How old was I?
In your 40s?
Oh my God, I don't know. No, I was in my I was in my 40s, I guess. Yeah.
Wow.
So
2 kids.
2 kids by then, and I had, like every woman's story, after every baby, I gained weight and I tried every diet. I even tried Atkins. I mean, like everything, Jenny Craig, everything. And sure, you'd lose weight while you're on the diet, but as soon as you went back to eating the way that everyone ate, you'd gain the weight back plus some.
So throughout our whole family life, you were essentially kind of a spectator to our lifestyle.
I mean, the whole time the kids were growing up, I was on the sidelines watching while Dan took them canoeing or camping or skiing or whatever, because I was just too overweight and out of shape to really participate in those kind of activities. So my contribution was food. Delicious, decadent, indulgent food. That was my calling card. If somebody did me a favor, I would pay them back with a cheesecake. It was my currency. Food was my currency. So then fast forward to starting to read all of this. And I was just, I don't know, something at the right time in my life, that perfect moment. And it just captivated me. And I became...
And you're an avid reader.
I'm an avid reader, but I became obsessed. Like I just started reading everything. And, like the China study sat on my nighttime table. I would finish it and start it and finish it and start it and finish it and start it. Because it was, kind of a bit of a dense scientific read. But I would have to say that book was the quintessential moment that I decided I can no longer feed my family this way. And so, we started leaning in, and that was fall 2010. And then I started making myself plant-based meals and still standard American for the family. And then it was kind of this moment where I was thinking, well, if I won't buy them cigarettes or drugs, why would I be buying them this?
Right.
So April 1st, April Fool's Day, 2011, I cleaned out everything out of the house.
The family is like, Mom, is this a joke? Come on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They were not happy. And so I said, well, this is how we're eating at home. I can't control you. Our son would have been, he was 16, about to turn 17, and our daughter was 19. So they were driving. They were in control of their lives. I couldn't control them or Dan when they were out of the house. But when we were at home, it was plant-based, more vegan than plant-based at that point. And there were some epic fails at first, for sure. They would, I'd have dinner, they'd pick at it, off they'd go for a drive, which was code for drive-through. And, but slowly but surely they started to like it more. But the real big thing, and I did this purely for health because of all the things I'd read by all of the, the physicians and researchers. The first month I lost 15 pounds without even trying, and, no exercise or anything. And that
I couldn't exercise.
Yeah.
We live in a very rural area, Indian Rock, by the way. Indian Rock Vegans refers to the hamlet that we live in here in Naramata. So it's very hilly, beautiful rural setting, but brutal for walking.
So I was certainly not doing any exercise. So, but then I just started losing weight. I mean, it was like literally melting off of me. And about 4 or 5 months in, I'd lost 60, 70 pounds. And so I started walking. At first, it nearly killed me just to get 100 yards up the hill. And just got better and better. And my stamina grew, and I kept losing weight. And now I do 5K every morning, up and down hills. So over the next 2 years, I went on to lose 133 pounds.
Wow. That's great. That's just so great. Like, that just blows my mind, Sheanne, that it all started with that sales clerk. First off, if anybody's ever worked a job in sales or a job where somebody has to communicate with strangers, one, it's scary. Like, she came up to you with the confidence to be like, oh yeah, maybe go home before you buy this. Like, that takes a lot of confidence. And I mean, you could have been like the meanest person in the world for all she knows to have the confidence to do that, but it really has led you down a completely
changed our lives.
Changed our lives.
Yeah. I mean, that just is so amazing.
Well, and we always feel like we should seek her out somehow. At the time she was just a random salesperson. I can't remember what she looked like or anything, but we owe her so much.
Yeah. And then on my side of the situation, again, when Sheanne started us off, that's, 2010, 2011, a typical mid-late 40s, male, shift worker, 4 on, 4 off, 12-hour shifts. Not the greatest diet because of work. About 30 pounds overweight, pre-diabetic, metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. The usual red flags, or not red flags that sometimes we see them, but just the usual progression that middle-aged men tend to see when they eat the standard American diet. And for myself in those 2 years, even though I was about 95% plant-based and out of the house, still scarfing down the odd animal products, burgers and poutine and pizza. But even at 95% eating that way in the household, I dropped the weight. My blood panels became, almost perfect, where no longer pre-diabetic, no longer metabolic syndrome, and good blood pressure, and just feeling really great.
All of those things that people just assume are normal. Like that's just part of aging, right? And right. It's like people just, oh, well, of course your blood pressure's up. And, your doctor's kind of like, oh, don't worry about it. You're that age and we'll just keep an eye on it. But, it happens.
Yeah. And then again, as men, we see it happening and it seems to be the norm. And, but I'm telling you, in those 2 years, it was pretty amazing. And so, that puts us up to.
So, we thought I was back to fitting into my wedding dress. I was fitter than I had been probably since high school. And I was
feeling good,
feeling great, brand new wardrobe. I would, and it's a really weird thing because I'd bump into I'd bump into somebody who I hadn't seen for a while. And it happened so rapidly. I mean, 2 years is a long time, but that's such a huge transformation. And then you'd bump into somebody you hadn't seen for a while, particularly women, and they would start to cry. And I would start to tear up, and I couldn't figure it out what was going on. But all of these women who had so struggled with their weight for their whole lives, and then they see somebody that they've only ever known as obese, back down to, my early 20s weight, and they would just become so emotional because I think we all give up. We all just assume I had given up. I kind of resigned myself to the fact that that's how I would be for the rest of my life. And then to see somebody change, I think, and I hope they were crying because it was so hopeful. And I think that's, initially when we started down this public journey, it was so hard for me to post my before and after pictures.
Yeah. See, for a living, what I do, I'm a media relations spokesperson with Canada's National Police Force. So for me, and social media platform, coordinator. So for me, it was very, very natural to say, look, we've got this amazing platform. It's time to share it.
But it was to me, it was like, I was ashamed that I'd gotten that large, and I was embarrassed, and all of those feelings that you have when you're that size, when you weigh 300 pounds. But then I thought of, this newfound joy that I had by regaining my health. And so, with Dan's pushing and me realizing that the only way you can really help people is to show them it's possible. And so that's when we started putting pictures out of before and after. Of course, this was kind of later on when we got into social media. But so backing up, this is 2013 now. I thought that that's what a plant-based lifestyle had to offer us, that this was all it was. Me losing 133 pounds, regaining my health, Dan regaining his health to a certain degree, all of these amazing improvements, feeling better, feeling younger. We'd gotten our kids on board even. They were plant-based, maybe not as clean as we were, a lot more junky vegan stuff. But so 2013, November, you could probably take over this part.
Yeah, so that brings us, like I say, 2 years after the start of this whole thing. And I remember it to the very day. What had happened was that whole week, first week in November, I had severe abdominal pain and couldn't figure out what it was. Again, our family medical history, we've got on my side of the family, my parents' brother, gastrointestinal issues, kidney stones and colitis. And so when that started cropping up, I thought, okay, this is, possibly kidney stone or kidney infection. And I put it off all week. And at work, people noticed that I wasn't looking very well. And finally that Saturday, because of the excruciating pain, I told Sean, I can't put up with this pain any longer, and it's got to be a kidney stone or something. So off to the emergency ward we went. That was Saturday, November 9th, 2013. That evening, off to our local emergency ward, and they ushered us in and took a scan that very night, same night, and typical waiting in the emergency room, and then ushered into an examination room with the one physician who essentially, walked us in, and not two steps into the room, and within two sentences, even two, he said, "Dan, it's not kidney stones or kidney infection. It's your right kidney. It's one massive tumor. It's cancer, and the tumor has metastasized out of the right kidney. It's spread into lymph nodes and looks like into the vena cava, which is that trunchial vein that connects all your organs." So it's interesting, even with the time that's gone by now, I can visualize and I can still hear those words. When you're not, we all go through life, and we know a certain amount about cancer, how prevalent it is and how deadly it can be. And that night, to hear those words and that explanation was just pulled the rug from under our feet, and it was a whole reset that from that point forward.
Yeah, from that minute, that absolute minute when the doctor uttered those words, I never had to nag Dan or tell him not to eat animal-based product. Like, that was it. Mm-hmm. Everything that I'd been telling you about, because every time I read something, I went, "Oh, listen to this. Oh my God, Ronnie."
Well, we listened to stuff and
everything just like, boom, hit you. Yeah. And that was it.
Yeah. So it was classified as stage 4 clear cell renal carcinoma, or kidney cancer. And again, the right kidney was one massive tumor. The protocol with my medical team was for surgery in December. That was going to be Christmas Eve. We were going down to Vancouver, which is down about 4 hours away from us in the interior here, and off to Vancouver General Hospital to have the right kidney removed. And the process was going to be very, very brutal. They said it was a large operation, given that they clamp off all your organs. And then the fact that the tumor had, a week later, we had gone to a specialist. He explained exactly what was going on, that the tumor had metastasized, had grown out of the kidney into that vena cava, growing towards my heart and lungs, and into several lymph nodes in the immediate area of the kidney and distant, and that it would be an extreme nephrectomy of removing the kidney, hopefully pulling the tumor out intact from the vena cava, and possibly the removal of some lymph nodes. Interestingly enough, I went into the diagnosis extremely healthy. Kidney cancer can be asymptomatic. I did not look like I suffered from cancer, and it was really, really an odd thing. They told us as well that that specialist said, he said, you guys, it's going to grow, it's going to spread, and this is terminal.
Wow. And he gave you that first specialist, it was, months to 2 years maximum.
Right. It was the oncologist that mentioned about it.
Yeah. So were you at a place that, like, you knew right away you were going to fight and that wasn't going to happen? Because I feel like most people would either be like, accept that and just go into a really dark place, or it's just like, nope, that's not it, I'm going to fight. Like, where were you at in that spectrum?
Well, for myself, I think it was just so, to hear those words, and stage 4 terminal. But I think there was some hope in the sense as to how I felt. And then with Sean's experience.
Well, it was, again, like Dan said, you just have the rug pulled right out under you. Right out. But, it took us, like a week or two to even, find our equilibrium again. But it was suddenly, I was thinking about all of the things I've been reading for the past 2 years. And I thought, okay, well, I've read it. Let's see if it's true. Let's put this into practice. Really kind of switched me, because I was reading about absolutely everything about plant-based nutrition and how it affected health. But I really started to refine my searches and my reading to cancer and nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is that there was 100 years of data showing that animal protein is linked to cancer cell growth. And, that was two things. I was really angry because I hadn't heard this our whole lives. And then secondly, I was hopeful because I'm thinking, well, okay, if we can really do the deep dive. So that was kind of the moment we went from vegan to whole food plant-based.
Yeah. And it really prepped you for that moment in a sense.
And I'm so thankful because, you're so fragile emotionally at that time to then retool your kitchen, learn how to cook, how to grocery shop. I can see that that's really difficult.
Yeah, we certainly empathize and sympathize with people that are going into a diagnosis that are still, standard American diet fed, to look at, okay, here's another option for me and another strategy to look at. It must be quite overwhelming. I think there's some solace, though, that there's so much information and assistance and support now compared to even just a few years ago as to what's available, from good, strong, credible resources. So again, for me at that time, I think the mindset was always, okay, how do I feel today? And that I've got to move forward through this. And, I guess, to summarize it, we laughed a lot and we cried a lot. In fact, it's amazing how much tears can come out of the human body. But there was just this, again, there was some hope in the sense that, okay, how do I feel today? And how have I felt, for the past few years? Because when looking at this cancer, stage 4 kidney cancer, to the degree that it had grown and where it was, that would have been like a progression of about 15, 20 years. So then again, you get into your mind that you can live with it. You don't necessarily, or you may die of it, but you can certainly live with it. And then looking at what we knew and we're starting to learn more and more and put into practice as to with whole food plant-based nutrition.
Yeah, because we really, it was starting to be, I called it our program of nutritional excellence. That's what I called it. And it was like, I was shoving greens into him. It was like, you need to eat more spinach, you need more kale, and we got super clean, like no vegan junk food, no, not a trace of oil.
Amazing.
So then, so then we looked at the medical treatment protocol was I had that surgery. They said I was in extremely healthy condition, that I'd be an excellent candidate for the surgery. And, I had a cardiologist and 2 urologists on hand, and the cardiologist just on hand in case things went sideways. They were very concerned of, possibility that I could die on the operating table of, like bleeding out or some complication. But Christmas Eve, that's how we spent it. The 4 of us in Vancouver, recovered, in hospital for a few days. It was 5 days. I don't have much recollection about the hospital stay, but there's one thing that I do recall. And it was one of those moments of like, wow, how did I get here? And in that hospital there, it's fairly old. And there's one of those large TVs that hang from the ceiling. And big blackened screen, the TV was off, and there was an afternoon. I kind of looked up at this black screen and I could see the perfect reflection of me laying in the bed below. And it was quite unnerving because I had an intravenous line in one arm, one in my neck. I had a epidural line going through to my back, plugged in with a catheter, and all these machines around me. And being, just typical middle age, not really having much medical interventions other than, joint injuries from, wrestling uncooperative clients, as we call them, throughout my career. But it was really, really unnerving. And it was like, wow, how did I get here? But even then again, it's like, okay, here I am, and got out of the hospital. It was brutal. It was brutal surgery recovery. In those first few weeks, I dropped about 20, 30 pounds. Wow. I couldn't eat because essentially I had, an incision across my abdomen that was shut with about 50 some odd staples.
You had no appetite.
No appetite.
That's crazy. And that was too, Dan, was with you being in a relatively good state of health. And I think that's an amazing point that you brought that up earlier, because, obviously people know, like, if you live like this, you can help prevent disease altogether. But if you start to like live like this as well, if something does happen, you're in a way better state to heal and be able to handle the surgery better and just all aspects of that. So it's not just preventing, but in a lot of cases like yourself, it's being able to come back from it, at the same rate or even healthier than you were before.
Exactly, and that was put to us as well. The doctors are like, you're an excellent candidate for the surgery. It's such a massive surgery. And then the recovery from the surgery as well, they were all quite amazed. The incision area, how it healed. And even like I said, too, not getting a lot of food in for those first couple of weeks. I couldn't sleep because of the meds. I got off of all the meds quite quickly because essentially I was just wringing out my abdomen, at night with nausea, with combination of medications for nausea and sleeping aids and, other things. And so I got off all that quite quickly.
Yeah, because you're 40 staples across the gut, like
50 some odd.
50, yes, from side to side, this huge chevron, and he's throwing up. And I'm thinking, I don't even know how he's doing this. So,
I thought I was going to die.
Yeah,
I thought I was going to die. And essentially the first couple of weeks, it was like a bite of an orange gussie, a bite of toast, a sip of water. And then, again, Sheanne was like, I got to get some calories and some nutrients into you. And it was essentially, freshly raw roasted nuts on the bedside that I'd graze on, throughout the day and throughout the night, a nut at a time. And that just got me, healthier or in a better place. And it's interesting, as I was bedridden for quite a while, I was upstairs, couldn't make it down the stairs, and then slowly but surely onto the treadmill, and the treadmill beside the bed. There's a photograph of me sitting in the bed in Eating Your Live, and you can see the treadmill behind me. I was on that treadmill, accurately, it was like 20, 30 seconds at a snail's, as slow as that treadmill would go. But it was still that mentality that I had. I felt it in the body. My body was telling me, you got to start moving. So on the treadmill, then downstairs to the living room, then to the end of the driveway.
The end of the driveway was huge. Oh. That was a monumental day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the physicians are just like, wow, look at your recovery. And then getting back to this point of being healthy and stacking the odds in your favor, we were able to watch and wait the cancer. And this, as a cancer diagnosis, people hear this a lot. Okay, well, it's doing this, it's not doing that. But for me, what it was, and it was a very aggressive type of cancer as well. But because I was so healthy, they were able to able to wait and watch.
But why? Because
well, what would happen was there's no effective treatment for stage 4 renal cell carcinoma or kidney cancer. They don't use chemo or radiation, and the only hope that I had with respect to medical intervention would be to get onto a trial study drug. And we hear a lot about it more and more. In fact, the drugs that I was being tested on a phase 1 trial study have been eventually licensed now and are available just for certain types of cancer. So it was to be placed on a trial study drug session, and it was to be, this started in March.
Right. And so, I mean, because he was so healthy, they didn't have to muddy, because as soon as you take anything, you muddy the waters and you're not even...
you can't.
You're not eligible to participate in a phase 1. So it was like, if we don't do anything, we might be able to get you into this phase 1, which, he had to have been that healthy to even qualify for that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. So then the session protocol was to be 4 treatments of the combination of 2 drugs every 3 weeks. So that meant driving down to Vancouver, every 3 weeks. We got 4-hour drive. We'd kick around Vancouver for a few days. It was at the Trial Study Center Cancer Clinic on the chemo ward floor. Curiously enough, I was there on breast cancer day, so I was the only man in the rooms and sitting in the chair for 4 or 5 hours and getting the intravenous treatment. But you look at our photographs that you see of us, we look then like we look now, and people would do double takes looking at us thinking, well, who of these 2 people could possibly be stricken with cancer, let alone stage 4?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, the mindset, again, we tried to make the most of it. And for us to be into Vancouver, it was...
And that protocol was going to be it was supposed to be 4 treatments
of the combination
drug,
and then followed by a maintenance treatment every 2 weeks of the one drug for the rest of my life.
Wow.
So that was the outlook. I only made it to the 3rd treatment of the combination when a couple of days after that 3rd session, I had a side effect where the drugs, immune therapy again, it boosts up your immune system. The analogy is like, it's okay. It's kind of like, unleash or opening the cage of that wild tiger and not knowing what that tiger will do next. It could attack other parts of your system, healthy organs and so on. And sure enough, I did have one of those severe side effects where one night it attacked my liver. With, again, for cancer diagnoses, fever is a big red flag. And that one night I woke up in the middle of the night and with a fever, and then kind of nudged Sheanne awake. I said, we got to get to the hospital. Something's going on. And they drew blood that night. And sure enough, my liver enzymes were at a critical state, very highly elevated. In fact, they were 25 times the normal level.
Wow.
And then the trial study people said, well, looking back at that, normally they cancel, they dismiss you because of that side effect if you even reach 5 times the normal level. So it was a near fatal side effect. So that day it was, thank you very much, Mr. Moskaluk. You're being dismissed from the trial study. So that puts us into May 2014. That is the last time I had any medical intervention from the system.
Wow. That's such like a roller coaster for both of you guys and your whole family. So once they released you, where did you guys go from next? Did you just amp up the nutrition to a whole new level? What did it look like for you guys after that point?
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, too, to look at it, the timeline of my remission, what had happened was after this surgery, I had 3 lymph nodes that they weren't able to remove because they were distant. One was near my windpipe area, my mid back and lower back. And of course, we know with cancer, with growth, it impedes on systems, and impeding your windpipe's not a great thing. But as I went through,
we were transferred back to
Kelowna for our oncologist in Kelowna,
and the oncologist there said,
yeah, they even back at that point, the oncologist said, well, that's good with what we got going on right now. You're off the study, but you would be naive to think that this will not spread and grow, that this is a terminal diagnosis. But we were looking at scan after scan, and
you couldn't be treated because. No. They waited. He was on severe or the prednisone. He was on an intravenous prednisone to try and
stabilize
his liver, and that took, about 6 months to recover from that near fatal attack on his liver.
But all the while,
and so during that time, they weren't really wanting to do anything with him because they wanted him to recover from that first,
right?
Mm-hmm. But I did, with the 3 lymph nodes that remained. They started seeing shrinkage in the lymph nodes to a point where that fall of 2014, they started using the term remission. They said 2 of the 3 lymph nodes are completely normal. You have 1 left that's showing abnormal. So that was an incredible. And it's interesting. Every time we went for another appointment, there was always good news. So it was, but it was, and again, though, regardless of what was going to happen, all I know is that day how I felt and what was going on. So it was very much of really focusing on, getting up in the morning, opening your eyes, saying, here's a day. I'm going to cry, I'm going to laugh, but I'm going to make it the best day I can. And then end the day, jumping back into bed, closing your eyes and going to sleep, and then waking up the next morning and say, okay, here we go. And then, so we fast forward then to the winter of 2015, and we go in for another appointment. And they said, we're closing your file today with the oncologist. And they said, you're cancer free. Your cancer at this point in time, that last lymph node is down to normal, and your cancer is now radiologically undetectable. And there's nothing more for us that we can do for you at this time. If you were to walk into the clinic today, we would turn you right around as not being a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, that's so incredible. Were your doctors just in complete shock? What was the reaction? Because they had told you that, you had weeks to live, if that.
Yeah. Because that's exactly, they gave us months to 2 years at best, and they described it. They said, it's going to be a miserable 2 years, Dan. is how they put it. And it's interesting because during the trial study phase of everything, in those meetings and those appointments, we kept reminding them, we do want it noted that we're whole food plant-based for part of our supplemental treatment to the protocols that we're under. But they shrugged their shoulders, or it was, well, keep doing what you're doing. They never asked about what we were eating. The only question they said was, how's your appetite? And that was the closest thing they got to talking about nutrition. Wow. And essentially, to a point where some of them at times, no, it doesn't really make a difference. Eat what you want to eat, but it's working for you, so keep going.
Or even, at one point he had a ton of blood, because going into a trial study, of course, you have to have
15 vials.
So much work.
Oh my gosh.
And so the nurse who was taking all this blood said, "Oh, you need to go home and have a big steak tonight to replace all this." And I'm thinking, are you crazy?
15 vials of blood that day.
Oh my gosh.
So we were really adamant. Every time we were there, we want it noted, because this was a phase 1 trial, right? So, if you're really going to do the science, let's list that this is us. We're eating. He's a completely plant-based. No interest whatsoever.
Yeah.
And, even at the end, though, when we were back to Kelowna, when we'd been dismissed from the study, he would see a different oncologist every time, because they're like, I was an anomaly. Fellow.
Yeah, I was an anomaly. And just said, yeah, you're Superman. We're, like you say, the basic question is, how did they respond? They kind of shrugged their shoulders and,
thought you were a special case, pretty much, right? Yeah.
Just an anomaly, an outlier, right?
So, it brings into the facts as to that, there's the protocols and the treatments that are available. You look into them, be your own advocate, learn about them, and what they are, what some of the possible effects are, what some of the possible percentages of benefits that are there with the treatment.
The statistics on renal cell carcinoma are?
Oh gosh, yeah. The survival rate for stage 4 renal cell carcinoma is 5% survival. So I had a 95% chance I was going to be dead. So, and then again, it's interesting. We're on this podcast here today. Every time that we present, one of the one thing that it just makes me beam is when we talk. I get up there, and again today I start looking at the calendar. I am now at 5 years and 3 months of being cancer free.
So cancer free.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And not even surviving.
But thriving.
And that's, and we know in our world, our plant-based world, where we, are constantly reading about, there are so many people like Dan. This is not an anomaly. There's so many people we read about who have been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and told that they're going to die, and they don't. And they go on to have happy, productive, long lives. And, for me, because I'm just obsessed with reading and research and all of that kind of thing, I have to say, one of the first books, too, that I read after Dan was diagnosed was Radical Remission, Surviving Cancer Against All Odds. And that was a physician who saw people like Dan who were being dismissed from the system, sent home. And I think to myself, if they really wanted to cure cancer, why isn't there a research team in our house swabbing everything, looking at what kind of toilet paper we use, what kind of this, nobody. They close our file and send us home.
That's what I was going to say. It has to be extremely frustrating for you guys, just knowing what all of your whole family has gone through emotionally and physically, but knowing that there's going to be people just like Dan going to get treated, and they're going to be told, first off, they're given just negative, just zero hope, which is going to affect every aspect of your health, just on mindset alone, and just knowing they're not going to be taught about actual nutrition. I just that frustrates me, and I haven't gone through that. I know that you guys, I can't imagine what that must be like for you.
Yeah, I think that is changing more and more. We're seeing some of the cancer agencies, and it's just growing exponentially, the consideration to, looking at or considering nutrition as an important part. And then a lot of times what I tell people with it, regardless, the science is strong, but how badly do you want to live? You'll go through a drug treatment that has severe side effects that can destroy your immune system and so on, but you won't consider eating vegetables and dropping something from your diet to why wouldn't you? How badly do you want to live?
Right. You want to tip those scales in your favor for sure. And our big message, like we said earlier, you brought the point up, is like, don't wait till the 11th hour.
Right.
You may not be able to come back from that edge depending on how far. I always feel that because Dan was 95% plant-based for that 2 years leading up to the diagnosis, maybe we'd already started to halt that cancer growth. Maybe it was already, we don't, who knows? We'll never be able to prove that, but I certainly have my theories. And I remember about 4 weeks or so after his surgery, he was still upstairs in bed, still bedridden. And the phone rang, and it was, how they always send off a little tissue sample of the cancer to the pathology department, and they kind of grow it in a petri dish to see what your doubling time is, to see what they're really dealing with. And they called and they said, we're really sorry to tell you that this is an extremely aggressive form of cancer. And I remember hanging the phone up and thinking, I guess that's it. I guess we're done. I guess that's it. There's no hope. But what I realize now is that it was an aggressive form of cancer in a hospitable environment. In a non-hospitable environment, such as Dan's body, it just wasn't doing that well. And I think you can, I've had the good fortune of going to the Plannutrition Conference down in Anaheim a couple of years ago, and Colin Campbell and many of the presenters were talking about this is a legitimate form of treatment for cancer, is adopting a plant-based lifestyle. And so, that's kind of our passion now, is to spread that message about so many things about health. But, we still get, so many women reach out to us that with breast cancer whose doctors have forbidden them to eat soy. And I'm thinking, your doctor hasn't read the research for a good 7 years, clearly. And I know doctors are super busy and they have a million patients, but that's like criminal.
That's important. It doesn't really matter how busy you are. If it's going to save the lives of your patients, then it has to be done. And you mentioned that book, which actually I haven't read, so I wrote it down that I do want to read that. Did you have any other resources just for people listening that may want to start diving in that just really helped you a lot?
Well, I think, the China study was great because it really talked about the mechanisms of cancer. And I have this little story. We live in kind of a deserty area. When we moved here, we have rattlesnakes everywhere. And I have never dealt with rattlesnakes.
I don't do that.
So, yeah. And so we learned as much as we possibly could about rattlesnakes, how they breed, when they breed, how they travel, everything. And it took away some of the fear. And I think cancer's the same way. We hear the word cancer and it just strikes fear in your heart. You just assume that it's a death sentence. But when you really start to learn about cancer and what is actually happening, it takes away some of the fear. And, especially I think, T. Colin Campbell is so progressive in his research. He's been researching cancer for 50 years and has just come up with so many. There's lots of really amazing researchers, but I just think that his explanations gave such hope to learn about cancer, and that, it's not this unknown, scary thing once you learn about it. There's some other researchers, obviously, Dean Ornish. He did so much amazing things with prostate cancer, and
then when you get to look at resources, one of the must read, I think, right off the bat is Michael Greger's How Not to Die, which is a great read. It categorizes all the different chronic illnesses chapter by chapter and really ties in everything together. So that's another excellent.
And Neil Barnard's got the Cancer Survivor's Guide. That's an awesome one as well. We just love. I think T. Colin Campbell, Neil Barnard, Dean Ornish, they are our Rolling Stones. I would get more excited meeting them than Mick Jagger. They are the guys.
I would too. Yeah. I would too.
We're very, very fortunate as well too here in British Columbia. We're good friends with Brenda Davis and Vicento Molina, two very renowned registered dietitians who have been at it here in 35 years. Tremendous. Brenda and Vicento's books are quite good. And again, the lectures online.
And that book is by Radical Remission. That's by Dr. Kelly Turner. And,
So what was interesting, Sheanne kind of threw that at me bedside just the first couple of weeks. And essentially more about the mindset and what Kelly at Dr. Turner had done. She had spoken to about, I don't know, over 100 different cancer survivors, 2,000, and narrowed it down. She had a list of 9 commonalities 90 commonalities. 10. Sorry. So she had 10 commonalities that were the top 10. Within, one of I believe the first.
Well, she would ask people, why do you think you survive cancer? And so people would give answers, and she just, categorized the top 10 answers. And number 1 was
whole food, plant-based lifestyle diet.
Wow. Number 2 was exercise, depending on what your physical condition was and if you could. And the rest were,
spirituality or mindset, mindfulness. Social setting, will to live.
Social support.
And then it's funny now, even now you still come across stuff. There was something very impactful that I came across just talking about one of the Sisu farm refuge sanctuaries that's just come together. Sisu is a Finnish term, SISU, which describes a stoic mindset and of beyond where your physical and mental capacities have reached their limit. That is the next level. So that one kind of stood out at me. Sisu, that's my new mindset. Is Sisu.
It's been such a crazy ride, and so we went through all this. I lost the weight. Dan survived stage 4 cancer, and he was sitting around that spring on the iPad.
Facebook, because typical Sunday and scrolling through stuff and came across the trailers for this fabulous new documentary that I was starting to see pop up, Eating You Alive, and Samuel Jackson, James Cameron, and all the rock stars of all these physicians. So for the heck of it, I just I direct messaged them and said, when is your film coming out? We're so anxious, so excited about this. We've seen so many of the other docs, and this is what we've been through. And to my surprise, within seconds, I got a message back from one of the producers, Mary Jacobs, and she says, "Can I call you right now, Mr. Moskaluk?" so we were on the phone, and typical Sunday afternoon. And actually, Sheanne was getting ready to leave for a couple of days to help a friend convalesce after hip surgery. So she's running around the house, and typical guy, she's not very happy because I'm wasting time on Facebook. And next thing you know, I'm on the phone with Mary, and Sheanne calls from the other end of the house. Who are you on the phone with? And what are you doing? I gotta get going.
I never sound like that.
And I said, I'm on the phone with the producers of Eating You Alive. And she kind of went quiet, and because she'd seen it as well. And then Mary, the gist of the conversation was, she says, okay, upload a couple of clips of yourself and your wife with just, an overview of the story and send that to us immediately. So got off the phone, sent Sheanne up to get kind of gussied up a bit because she was in traveling sweats and stuff. I said, sit down in the chair. I gotta clip you. We sent the clips in, and within a couple of days, from the Sunday to that Wednesday, they called back, said, yeah, we finished the film, but we're reopening because we definitely want to include your story. And said, we want to get you down here as quick as possible, hopefully this week if we can. And the first question was, well, where's here? And she said, Atlanta, Georgia. So by that Thursday, we were in Atlanta, Georgia, meeting the tremendous crew, Garden Fresh Media and Eating You Alive, and we just had a great couple of days with them.
That was really we were still so fragile at that time too.
So when you look at the film, I look at back, we were both very emotional. I was, talk about stoic and serious. I know if I was to re-give that interview now, of course, having survived everything, I would be a lot more animated. Yeah. But here we are, all these 5 years, 3 months later, and the film itself has been a tremendous platform for us. The involvement, again, when we talked earlier about meeting different people and connecting with this plant-based vegan community, it's just tremendous. Gosh, we got to go down to LA for the premiere. We've attended Q&A and film screenings, here in Canada, a couple of the provinces, and it just keeps going and going. And then the connectivity worldwide as well. it's a tremendous community, be it either, the health advocates, the physicians, the coaching, the support, the outreach that, like for us, it's from, we'll come and clean your kitchen out. We'll answer some questions. We'll teach you how to cook or just we'll talk to you. And we've had a lot of outreach from around the globe, and it could be that, late evening call for a couple hours with a cancer diagnosis and just talking. Yeah. So one of the really interesting things too is, and of course, that we all try and do so much for this movement and for people's health. Sometimes you get the impression is like, am I doing what I'm doing? Is it being effective? And should I be concentrating on something else? And then your personal life as well. You got, the house reno goes to the side, but it never fails. We'll be in a public place and somebody will tap us on the shoulder, a complete stranger, and they'll just say, "Thank you. You changed my life."
Wow. And
yeah. It's funny, getting back to the story about Sheanne and us being together and meeting people after her weight loss. We would, summertime, she's got her sunglasses on. She'd be standing beside me. We'd see an old friend that we hadn't seen.
We went to a wedding. The wedding was...
Oh, the wedding was the biggest. Yeah, we're like people were very uncomfortable and were kind of looking at me straight on in a conversation, kind of, and just looking at Sheanne to the side, head to toe, not recognizing her until she started to speak. Because they were under the impression, oh my God, Dan and Sheanne have split up. He's got a hot girlfriend.
That's amazing.
It was very, there was some really strange, interesting reactions for sure.
So it's just, and then the health advocacy, of course, has been a big part. And then, of course, we start to learn about the environmental impact, about, animal agriculture. And then the ethics of it as to what we're doing to these billions of animals that have just as much right to be here on the planet as we do and to lead their lives.
And it's like all of this suffering to make us suffer. It's absolutely ludicrous.
And all for the point of an industry that was set into place to make money, has no concern about our health or well-being.
But, the science is catching up too. Yeah. I mean, for decades, people thought that we needed to drink dairy or have, animal products to make us healthy and strong. We need calcium for bones. And so I think, the science is catching up. Unfortunately, the science just does not have the budget that industry does. So what are you going to hear? You're going to hear the billboards for dairy and what have you. So.
Yeah, because and that is by no means science, it's marketing, and they do a good job at what they do. And that's, like you said, it's all financial gain, and not to mention the close ties between the FDA and the pharmaceutical companies. And that's why, I could probably say for you guys too, we encourage you just to dive into research just as much as you possibly can, because the ties between food and drugs and just this cycle of eating poorly, then you're sick, then you're paying for the meds, but eating the same food is just insane. So please dive into the research.
Yeah, no, that's right. True. The more you learn about all those three components.
And, I have to say, we are so proud to be Canadians right now because our new Canada food guide.
So amazing. So I'm very jealous. Very jealous.
That's what happens when you put 37 scientists in a room for 3 years and you do not let the lobbyists or industry funded or sponsored research near them. When they only look at the real science, that's the recommendations they come up with.
Yeah. And then for everybody who's, we've been on cloud 9 since we got up, we watched the live presser with our health minister that morning.
At 6:30.
At 6:30 in the morning archive. And it was incredible. And now, worldwide, people are looking at this as an example again of what can happen with a food guide, looking at eliminating actual, food categories. Dairy is no longer an actual category.
It's so amazing.
Protein. And I think the biggest sentence that we just always state is that the quote unquote is make water your beverage of choice.
Yep.
And no longer the other white substance, which is a growth hormone for another species.
Yeah, and they're advocating plant proteins over animal proteins.
How have you seen, because this came out, it was last month, right?
Yep.
So how have you noticed any difference, like when you go shopping, or have you had people ask you even more questions? Like, how have you seen it impact your community? Because that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, you walk in the store and there's no longer milk. Like, what is that? What's it looking like?
So what's going on? It's definitely palpable. You can see it happening with the sense that now that, first of all, the Canada Food Guide is the second most used and demanded requested federal document, second to the taxation form.
Wow.
So Canada Food Guide has such a strong impact throughout our lives with in all our institutions, be it schools, hospitals, prisons, and at all levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal government. So what happens now is there's this demand for more knowledge and awareness about it. So that's starting to unfold. So then that permits, the advertising dollars to be there because the products are available. So then that loosens up the restraints of and the apprehension of mainstream media to be
talking about
it. So it is snowballing. But then on the other hand, we've got this just unbelievable now this fight that we see dairy the most. It's interesting. Dairy, they're in denial in the sense that they removed it, but it's still talking about dairy as being good. Meat again was they're still
trying to fly under the radar.
They're trying to fly.
Dairy take it.
Yeah, but and the egg industry, which wasn't there, they're not even talking about it. They're not even mentioning. They don't even want to make eye contact with it right now. So, but we're seeing how notorious and how ruthless dairy is. And it's interesting that there's been an ad campaign in Ontario that's been called on the carpet, where there's a review board for ad accuracy and truthfulness, that there's complaints have been filed against the Dairy Canada producers to pull those ads because they're untruthful. The ad states that no hormones. We know. Well, of course, there's hormones. There might not be added hormones, but it's a growth fluid. So it's interesting to see. So
they're working very hard to crawl back into our grocery carts, and they're spending a ton of money to do it.
I'm sure. Sure. Well, it's interesting too. I think one of the most interesting things that we'll be able to look at from what you guys are doing is also because this is on a government level. This is what they're going to have to take into the school systems as well. Mm-hmm. That's interesting to me because I want to see how it affects the kids, whether it's, grades, attention, health. I think that's just going to be so interesting to go back and look at that.
Yeah. It's funny because not only can we expect to see it, we can actually physically or we can verbally demand it now.
Yeah, right.
And it's funny because, again, I'm a federal employee, or was for 33 years and a half years, just retired in January. And for the past, 5 years, we've been espousing plant-based nutrition and, just being kind of cast aside as no, we don't want to talk about this. So now, when you start having the conversations with everybody, so how about that Canada Food Guide, eh? And when you start saying, we're going to start demanding this, you can see people's eyes get really wide, what do you mean? But they're curious. There is a big curiosity is happening.
I think it's a little bit of validation of everything that we've been doing. Kind of, it's like, I guess they're not that crazy after all, because the Canada Food Guide's changed, So it's like, I think people are starting to sit up and take notice.
Yeah.
And I think, the plant-based world is just exploding. We're getting more and more products, across our prairie provinces. Legumes are being forward-thinking investors are really putting their money into more plant-based crops.
Yeah, pulses.
All of
it. Tyson just took over a vegan meat company, I believe, adding their own vegan meat company.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting though too is we have to then look at our food system. And this is another conversation that's happening worldwide. We hear a lot from Dr. Salish Rowe from Vegan World 2026. And again, for those not familiar with him, Salish Rowe is the producer from Cowspiracy and What the Health, two other great films. But here in Canada and across the globe, there's this conversation as to now that we have to assist our farming community to transition from animal agriculture to plant-based agriculture. And we became involved with a grassroots movement, Nation Rising, which was their inaugural march and rally last year on our Parliament Hill in Ottawa last July, where about over 400 of us marched to Parliament Hill We had James Aspey, ourselves, Dr. Celeste Rowe, and Dr. David Jenkins, who's the inceptor of the glycemic index, deliver the message to our federal government. There's 3 demands. A, we need to see an end to subsidies to animal agriculture. We need to see an assistance to animal ag farmers to transition to plant-based production. And we also need to look at our communities' availabilities to plant-based foods. And that's communities everywhere, our northern and indigenous communities, everybody.
Affordability.
So yeah, and affordability of those products. So when you get a movement like Nation Rising getting together and that was tremendous for us because being from Ottawa, all our lives, and we went back last year, first time since the 80s. And since our wedding. And to march and stand on our Parliament building area and deliver these messages and be with all these like-minded people and bring this forward, it was an incredible experience. Yeah. And there's so many things. Like you got Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine who are just
taking names and
taking names.
Yeah. I think, I guess we do live in a bit of an echo chamber and we see huge and positive changes.
Yeah, that echo is breaking through the barrier.
That chamber is bursting open. So we're very hopeful, very positive. The future's looking very plant-based.
It definitely is. And I mean, with stories like your guys' story, I mean, it's just going to continue to spread and just inspire so many people. I mean, you guys are incredible. And I mean, I know we just covered a lot with your story and things you're working on, but is there anything that you guys are working on in the future that you just want to put out there and share? I know, Dan, you just retired, so congratulations with that. And, but yeah, so what does the future look like for the 2 of you?
Well, we're kicking off next week with the Holistic Holiday at Sea cruise.
Jealous.
I know, for 11 days we're going to be able to stalk all these rock stars. We're presenting the film. We're not stalking anything. No.
But yeah, so that's going to be fabulous. And then we have some speaking engagements lined up at Veg Fest here in British Columbia, in Ontario.
We're hoping to get back to LA hopefully this year. But I guess it's the health advocacy, and as well, we're heavily involved in the animal rights movement as well. And that's interesting because as a veteran police officer, I've been on both sides of the protest lines now.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a whole other
show.
That is very interesting, though. But I mean, I guess you know what to not do to not get arrested, though.
There's 2 points to make there. There's what the police expect of you as a lawful activist, because we, in many of our countries, in Canada, we're very, very fortunate to have the right to lawful assembly and voice our concerns and bring topics up. But then again, too, I think we do need to keep our law enforcement agencies accountable. So, yeah, for my former employer, they're a little nervous, I guess, to say, because I'm media trained. I've been a spokesperson now at the national level for 10 years. And I know police tactics. I'd love to see great conduct, and I'm very proud of my organization. And like any organization, though, if you see poor conduct and improper infringements of people's rights, I'm there on that.
Yeah.
So we're also contributors with Jane Unchained.
Very cool.
So we cover a lot of her the events here in Canada on Jane's Velez Mitchell's behalf, activism, and then Sean at the sanctuary.
Yeah, we've got a farm sanctuary where we just not we, but I work at one, or volunteer at one, where we just rescued 3 calves from the dairy industry, and that was big because that brought a lot of education to people that they didn't know what happened in the dairy industry. They're like, what do you mean you rescued calves from the dairy industry? And we had people that had no idea what was actually happening.
Are you documenting any of that? Or
so we've got our social media platforms. Our open page, Dan and Sheanne Moskaluk, and then Indian Rock Vegans as well.
So those calves have been amazing. They have brought so much attention, and we've had so many people reach out to us and say, I had no idea. I'm never eating dairy again. I don't want to participate in this. And so that was really big as well. And we've got pigs that were due to go to slaughter that actually came to Critter Aid, ended up being pregnant. So now we have a family of 9 pigs and 12 pigs in total. So that's also a lot of education as well, because people are like, why are these pigs so big? Because you're eating babies. You're eating pigs that are sent to slaughter at 4 to 6 months. You've never seen a pig that's 7 years old, so it's that's really great too.
I know. Yeah. Between the activism, the health advocacy, we are hopeful that we will get Indian Rock bed and breakfast retreat immersion site here at our lovely property.
Amazing. Well, I would love to come visit once you get that rolling, because that sounds incredible.
Well, that would be a lot of fun. Yeah. Teach people how to cook plant-based, shop plant-based, and drag you up my hill, throwing you in my lake, whatever it takes. Yeah.
Perfect. And Dan, I know you just mentioned the social media link, so I will be sure to add that into the show notes. That way people can just go click and give you guys an ad. And guys, please go do that, because they put up amazing content, and that way you can keep up with everything that they're up to, the speaking engagements that are coming up, and just Dan and Sheanne, just closing questions that I ask every guest. And you guys can answer separately or together. Probably you guys might want to answer separately, but but if you guys just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's something that's been your biggest takeaway through your own wellness journey so far, but if you just had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
I'll go first. So mine would be your own advocate. And in all things in life, particularly if you're dealing with a medical situation, do your research, be comfortable with what's happening to you. You don't necessarily have to do what they tell you to do. So I think that bleeds into all parts of your life. I think this has been such a transformation for us now. It makes me question almost everything in life. So be your own advocate. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess for me, as a cancer survivor again, but cancer and everything else too, of how you can turn your health around. Piece of advice is never underestimate, what this could do for you and where it could bring you and the journey it'll send you on. Going plant-based was one of the things that has changed our life so drastically and probably essentially saved mine. So for the message again is everybody take a really careful look at what is going on with the information that's coming out with a whole food plant-based diet. What do you got to lose? You got everything to gain.
Yeah. And it's not only your health, it's the environment, this planet, if we're going to survive, and it's the animals. It's a win-win-win.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree. And just thank you guys so much for taking time to come on. I mean, you guys are incredible. I can't wait to keep up with everything that you guys do and just how many people you guys inspire. So just thank you guys again. I had absolutely loved having you two.
No. Yeah. Well, and likewise yourself too, because without all these podcasters and, these tremendous efforts in the communication, the connectivity that we have, fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Dan and Sheanne. They're doing so much positive work, so be sure to give them a follow on social media to keep up with everything that they've been working on. You can find their social media links that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drkaseyjohnson.com. That's drkaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, websites, all of that. So Dan and Sheanne's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Dan and Sheanne, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you loved it. I hope it inspires you. And most importantly, I hope you take action.